Good afternoon, Year 11, and welcome to my second revision YouTube clip for you guys. So I just thought I'd go through sort of top tips for the exams, what you can do to prepare, and kind of things to help you within the exam. So top tip number one would be to read the question. The examiner is not going to give you any marks for things that actually aren't corresponding to the demands of the question. So don't waffle, plan your answers. That's really important, because if you are planning, you will put in the right focus and therefore your marks will be awarded. If you just launch into an essay and it doesn't really have the same focus, then you essentially might be writing out a recipe for, I don't know, lasagna, because you're not going to get any marks. My second top tip is read the question. That's such a big issue with students. They just get off on the wrong foot. They don't quite understand it. Remember how I said to take a highlighter into this exam? That's the reason you have a highlighter. So you can really underline, you can highlight what is the focus of this question, what am I meant to be answering it on? And my third top tip, read the question. That's the major thing I want you to remember. Read that question. It's the most important thing you can do in the exam, is to read and understand the question fully. Right, I've gone through and I've worked out the timings for you for the exam. Now, I think we've all discovered that doing the exam front to back doesn't work. Okay, you end up taking too long on a 4-mark answer, and then you sacrifice a 32-mark answer. So don't do that. So what I've done is learn these timings tonight. When you get into the exam, you can write them on the front of your exam paper and check them off as you do them and stick to those timings. So if you've given yourself 45 minutes for section C, try and stick to that. So the timings are as follows. Your section C, if you're starting your exam at 2, should take you to 2:45. That's 5 minutes to plan, 40 minutes to write. You then go into section B. So your question 4 is the one you do first. You spend 5 minutes planning that and 20 minutes writing it. So you start that at 2:45 and you finish that at 3:10. Question 3, you have from 3:10 to 3:25, and that should take you 3 minutes to plan and about 12 minutes to write. Question 2 is from 3:25 to 3:35. You plan for 2 minutes, you write for 8. Question 1, you start at 3:35 and then you finish at 3:40. That should take you maybe 1 minute to plan, so remember your 5 C's, and then 4 minutes to write. That then leaves you with section A from 3:40 to maybe 3:42, and that's just to complete section A. Remember, that is not there. You don't need to spend 5 minutes on section A. That then leaves you 2:45 to about 2:42 to 2:45, so that's about 3 minutes to check your work. Okay, so just going through the exam paper chronologically. Obviously, just be aware of the different types of stages, the pros and cons. So, for example, if you're performing in the round, the fact that you have to keep turning around. If you're performing on a thrust stage, that you can't bring in loads of scenery. If you're performing in a promenade theatre, the fact that actually you've got to address both sides of the audience. Make sure that you're clear with your positions on the stage. So, for example, in this image, where's the pot plant, where's the blue settee? Remember, it's always from the actor's point of view, and downstage is towards the audience, upstage is away from the audience. So again, where, for example, is the bench and where is the lamp? Then, in professional theatre, who's responsible for rigging the lighting? Front of house, stage manager, technician. It's the technician. In the professional theatre, who's responsible for props and sets? Stage manager, technician, director. In a professional theatre, if they don't have a master of props, that would be the stage manager's job. 3, when performing on a thrust stage, what do you need to think about, or what is true? It's better to keep set stages to a minimum. The stage type suits detailed set and backdrops. The audience can only see in one area. The answer is that you need to keep things to a minimum because you have the audience on 3 sides. When performing on a proscenium stage, which of the following is true? It's easy to bring set and props on and off stage. The audience are all sat at the same level. The actors need to perform all around them. Well, it's the first one, because it's easy to take things on and off the stage because you have a big backstage area. Okay, moving into section B, just start thinking now about the characters from 39 steps. So just go through and think of 5 adjectives that you might describe Richard Hannay, Pamela, Annabella, the crofter, Margaret, the salesman, the professor, the heavies, The McGarrigles. Just try and think, right, okay, how would I describe them if I maybe saw them walking down the street? Okay, then going into section B, question 1, there are different focuses you can get for these questions. So if you do get asked a question on costume, remember your 5 C's, so context, character, condition, colour, climate. So context. Always mention it's the 1930s, okay? This isn't a contemporary play. We're not meant to think it's happening in the future. It's happening in the 1930s, right 1930s, regardless of what the question says. So, if you're thinking about costume, are they, for example, in a uniform? So a uniform in the 1930s might have looked different to a uniform for a contemporary person. So a cleaner, for example, is not going to be wearing the same uniform that they would have worn in the 1930s. So character, what type of character are they? Are they rich? Are they poor? Condition, are their clothes new or are they worn? Do they look like they have patches on them, etc.? The colour. Colour has meaning on stage. So black sort of means mysterious. The lighter the colour, the more wealthy the characters tend to be, because if you think about if you're wearing a beige or a light suit, you couldn't do a manual job because it would get dirty. If you do a manual job, say let's say you dig roads, you'd wear a dark brown or dark blue outfit because that wouldn't show the dirt as much. Climate. Are they in a hot or cold place? Are they inside? Are they outside? Try and think how that would have an impact on your costume design. Costume also includes any facial hair you want your actors to have. So moustaches, think of those McGarrigle kind of great big red wigs. It also includes hair, so if you want the hairstyle to be of a particular type. It also includes makeup. Now, makeup in the 1930s was quite discreet. Most women didn't wear makeup. The only 2 characters that possibly would wear makeup are Pamela and Annabella. Annabella would definitely be wearing more makeup because she's more seductive. So if you think of a character like Mae West, she might have kind of red lipstick and blusher and eyeliner on, whereas Pamela might have a kind of pink lipstick on. So it's not as obvious as Annabella. You can also include a handheld prop that helps you to kind of understand the character a bit better. So say you're designing the costume for the crofter, you might have him holding a farm tool like a spade or a digger or something, just to indicate that he works manually in a farm. The next question is lighting. Now, there's a good chance that lighting could come up, so I do think it's worth thinking about. Again, you can still use the 5 C's. So context, still mention it's the 1930s. Where are they, for example? The character, what type of character are they within the scene? And are they the focus of that scene? If they're the focus, then how's the lighting going to have to change to make sure that the audience look at them? The colour. So again, colours have meaning in lighting. So red tends to indicate danger or love. Yellow tends to be sort of sunshine or kind of morning. Blue gels tend to indicate that it's outside. And a whitewash means that there's kind of bright lights. Someone's turned the lights on. There's no such thing as a dark light, so please don't say that. You can have dim lights. You can dim the lights and you can make them brighter. Climate, again, are they inside, outside? Are they being pursued? So in terms of lighting, you can talk about coloured gels. So if you put a gel in front of a light, that means that you can change the colour. You can also talk about spots and follow spots. So spots on the whole are for looking at a particular character and focusing our attention there. So it might be when we first see Pamela, for example, on the train, that you might have a follow spot on her that stays on her just to indicate she's an important character. We're meant to be looking at her. Gobos are where you actually put something in front of the light that has a pattern on it, and that pattern is then enlarged onto the stage. So it could be the pattern of a window, it could be the pattern of trees or leaves, and that gives the impression that they are in a space without having to rely on set. You can also use a smoke machine as part of lighting. So if you get a question asking about how would you recreate the Scottish Moors, a smoke machine would be a really good thing to use, because that would give that kind of atmospheric, cold atmosphere that you're trying to create. If you get a set question, there are lots of sort of different things you can talk about. Now, you could decide to make the set a composite set. A composite set is when you have all of the items of props and scenery on stage all the time, and essentially they just get moved forward and everything is there. So there's one bit that could be the McGarrigle Hotel, there could be another bit that could be King's Cross. So, again, your context, you're always mentioning the 1930s. Where are they? The character, what type of character are they? How are they going to interact with the space? The condition, is this an upper class flat that I might find important mansions, or is this a kind of old, tired out, cheap run Hotel. The colour. Again, colour has meaning. So what type of colour would show that you're wealthy and rich compared to someone who's maybe a bit poor? So think about also how you can suggest the setting. So the McGarrigles, for example, you could use lots of tartan in your set design to indicate you're meant to be in Scotland. The climate, again, is it inside, outside? Is it a private space like a bedroom, or is it a public space like a station? Then you could get asked about sound. So sound, again, mentioning the 1930s, where are they meant to be? The characters, so what type of character are they? What sort of sound effects might kind of suit those characters? So for condition, think about the sound and where it is. So is it a sound in the room, like a ringing telephone, or is it meant to be far away, like a foghorn when Richard Hannay kind of jumps off the train? The colour, now that's a bit trickier for sound, but think about whether the sound is recorded or whether it's going to be live on stage. So is your actor who's actually firing the gun, is that gun going to make a noise, or are you actually going to have that pre-recorded and someone actually does it from a sound cue? The climate, again, think about whether the space is small or the space is large. So is it a really echoey space so the sound's going to disappear? Is it quite a small space that's meant to be quite kind of a sharp, loud sound that we're meant to kind of have a reaction to? Okay, then going into question 3, the interaction question. Now this really wants you to talk about how you would create atmosphere between two different characters. So firstly, give a context of the scene. I want to create in this scene the atmosphere of romantic tension or mystery or whatever it is you want to create. And then you just talk about the vocal and physical delivery of the character you're cast as and the other character in the scene. So let's, for example, say I'm cast as Richard Hannay, and the scene we're talking about is the Crofters scene. So Richard Hannay wants to get information without being discovered. He doesn't want to give away his true identity. The Crofter, on the other hand, he's quite mistrusting and quite suspicious about what Richard Hannay is doing. So how do you create that on stage? So think about the vocal delivery, the physicality, who's going to move away, who's going to make facial expressions, look at a particular person, kind of scratch their head like you don't believe what this guy's telling you, sort of with your vocal delivery maybe going up at the end to show that perhaps you're lying. Okay, and then moving on to the big question in section B, which is question 4. So question 4, if you're really struggling with the structure, they actually give you the structure in the question. So if you take, for example, the question that's behind me, you're performing the role of Annabella. Great. German spy, I know loads about her, I can talk about her till the cows come home. The question actually says, describe how you would use your acting skills to interpret Annabella's character in this extract and explain why your ideas are appropriate both for this extract and the play as a whole. They've actually listed for you how they want you to write this essay. So the first thing is, the word interpret is there first, okay? So your interpretation of who is Annabella, how would you play her? The next thing they ask you to look at is in this extract. So within the extract, how would you play her? Pick a line from the beginning and a line from the end of the extract as a rule of thumb. And then it says the play as a whole. So you pick 3 moments where you would play Annabella. What I've suggested to people is if you've said a particular character trait, try and find a scene that connects to that character trait. So for example, if you've said that one of her aspects is that she's a spy, you might pick Annabella's very last sort of line in her dying breath, where rather than asking for a vicar or asking for a priest or asking for an ambulance, she gives Richard Hannay the secret word about natural act, showing that actually when you strip Annabella away, at her core she's a spy. So that would be a good indicator of that you understand she's a spy, and it's beautifully seen in that particular scene. So interpret who the character is. You then need to look at the extract. You then need to pick 3 other moments from the play as a whole. Okay, the next video is something I've actually sent you that is a really, really short clip. This is 5 minutes and it breaks down basically the story into really, really simple sections. So just so it's clear, the Oresteia is clear in your head before tomorrow. So if they ask you about relationships and who's who and whose mother was she and who's that guy in relationship to him, you've already watched this and you've already kind of worked it out. So please watch that clip. I've sent it to you as a separate link.
So, a long time ago, I said I was going to summon...
Don't need to watch it now though. So, section C. Firstly, do you have your 3 moments? Secondly, have you thought about the type of question you may be asked? Now, I've kind of been racking my brain and thinking, okay, they could ask this focus or that focus or this focus. So what I've done is I've come up with some alternative questions, focus focus of those questions that might possibly come up. I'm not an oracle. I don't have a magic crystal ball. I do not know what is in the exam tomorrow. This is just my best educated guess, okay? So they might ask you about communicating themes within the play. So the themes of the play, that it was about revenge, justice, violence, and also female power. The style, if they ask you about the style, it is incredibly non-naturalistic. It is purely Brechtian in style. They did that really, really well. They really stuck to Brecht. They had singing, they used poetry, they went backwards and forwards in time, they broke the fourth wall, they distanced the audience from what was happening on stage. So all of that is incredibly Brechtian. So if that's the style they ask you, Brechtian, non-naturalistic. Right, the period is meant to be set in the 5th century BC. Okay, the setting, ancient Greece. Convincing relationships. So you have relationships between mothers, daughters, sons, fathers, husbands, and you also have the character of the nurse. Now, if they ask you about the genre of the play, the genre is it's a tragedy. It had humorous elements in it, but it was not a comedy, okay? So don't get confused. It is tragic. It can still have humorous elements in it. Contrasting characters. So you might want to talk about how Clytemnestra was very much in contrast to Cassandra, for example, and the character's journey. So which of the characters change? Well, you might want to pick on the Furies and how at the very beginning they're very aggressive and violent and they're ready to kind of rip people apart, and by the end they've supposedly been tamed and they're no longer those creatures. So did you believe that journey? Did you think that was well kind of communicated to you? So in terms of your 3 moments, I've also sent you this slide behind me. Now this slide, if I was you, if you haven't had the time to prepare 3 moments, I would have this up on my wall tonight. I'd be watching it, I'd be reading it through again, just getting it in my head. So I know the names of the characters I'm going to talk about. I've got my automatic introduction there. I have the names of the actors. I've also got their pictures just to kind of put that in my memory. I have quotes that I've highlighted in yellow, and they're really short quotes. Let this moment be a fresh start. Agamemnon's wife will kill us both tonight after her husband has raped me. He had killed their mother, poor baby. Easy peasy, that's so easy to remember, okay? I've then vampired all of the points, so vampires give people frightening ideas. At the bottom, I've then given my evaluation 1, which is a technical thing that the actors did, so whether they played the character convincingly, whether I could hear them, whether I could see them, whether their accent was sustained, etc. And then evaluation 2, so what the character kind of socially communicated to me. So what did Clytemnestra make me feel? What did Cassandra make me feel? What did the nurse make me feel? So these are just 3 moments. So my final slide. Learn the timings, just have them learnt tonight, so when you get into the exam, you write them down, you stick to them, you stick to that plan. Do section C first, okay? That's my biggest advice to you. Then just keep going backwards through till you get to section A. Label your questions correctly. My goodness, that is such a small mistake that can cost you so much. And I know already from experience that they do not take that into account. So if, for example, you just put the wrong number and you answer that question, then you get 0, because obviously you're not in any way attempting to answer it, because it'll be a completely different question. So please, 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 when you're writing them, triple check, have I written that question? Is that corresponding to the question number? And lastly, just going back to my top tip for GCSE is read the question. You have hardly any time in this exam to actually write everything you need to write. So if you waffle, if you go off the focus, it's not going to get you any marks and it's just wasting your time. So plan your time effectively. Use those timings to actually allow yourself that time to plan, think about, construct your answer. Keep pulling back to the focus of the question. Really, really get it clear that that's the answer you want to give, and then write. Don't just think, well, I've got all this stuff to write, I should just launch into it. Just plan your time effectively, and actually your writing will be much quicker and much more concise, and you'll actually probably end up getting a much better mark for doing it that way. Okay, email me if you want to, guys. If you're stuck on anything, just, get in touch. Don't suffer in silence.